the FCC hasn't shut us down quite yet. I haven't even swore yet, so it's been a very solid day. We're in the last hour right now, so I figured, you know what? Let me put out the bat signal one more time. Let me get one more guest on the show today. Not really a lot of hockey to talk about, but he's still just a great guy to catch up with. We are joined right now by CM Punk. Man, how you doing?
I am wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. So we got to tell the story real quick. I get a text message from you. Oh, I'm sorry. It was a Twitter message at about 3 a.m. Jacksonville time last night. And why do I picture you right now like Jack Nicholson in The Shining during this quarantine period?
It's not that bad. My world is backwards. I've always been a night owl anyway, and now with the quarantine, like, I got nothing to wake up for. You know what I mean? So like I make my own schedule, and really I stay in my house, I work out in my home gym, and I walk my dog. It's really my only responsibility. So, I may wind up playing Call of Duty till like 3 a.m.
There we go, a little Call of Duty. I like it, man. Well, obviously, we're in Jacksonville, Florida here, and it's been the most casual experience during this quarantine. The beaches opened up like 3 weeks ago already. I think the governor just implemented that next week will be phase 2 where the gyms will open back up again and everything. I sense that it's a little different right now in Chicago. How are things been in Chicago with the quarantine right now?
We're making do. I'm one of the people who I've tried to do like PSAs for the local government and for state of Illinois to get people to stay home. I'm a big believer in this is worse than the flu.
Yeah.
If we stay in and we try to contain it as much as we can, flatten the curve, we'll be better for it. 6-8 months down the line. Gyms are still closed. I'm doing what I can by supporting all my local pizza chains and ordering pizza almost every night. Because that's the big sufferers are going to be the small businesses. You know what I mean? And I got a lot of local places. I love to go get tacos, coffee, pizza, ramen, pasta, whatever, you name it. And I'm just trying to do what I can by staying in, but also ordering a lot of food.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. And, the last time that we had you on the show, we were breaking down the NHL playoffs. We'll get into hockey talk in a little bit here, but a lot has changed, actually, since probably about a year ago now that we had you on the show. You ended up doing an interview for StarCast 3. Now, sometimes you're on backstage on Fox Sports 1. That's every Tuesday night at 11, by the way. Check it out. But how is it making that transition and just being back in wrestling again?
I love it. I love the Fox show because everybody at Fox has treated me, impeccably. Kind of got to reconnect with Renee Young, who is my friend from WWE from 6-7 years ago. She's great at what she does. She makes the show super easy to do. And it's fun to get to talk about stuff. It can be a little stressful sometimes. I think people get mad a lot based on what I say, but Fox is stoked. So it's nice to be able to get to talk about wrestling without people having a preconceived notion of what I'm supposed to say or whatever. I literally just watch the shows and I get to comment on them. It's pretty relaxed.
Well, it is kind of a blessing that you're able to be yourself, whether people enjoy that or not. I mean, the fact that you don't really read from a script, that you get to be yourself still, that's definitely a cool thing. And I have to ask the question. Obviously, you're talking about wrestling again. You're doing interviews and you're around wrestling fans. You're in that environment again. I mean, for me, when I retired from football, I said I would never go back because I was just over it. But the more I analyze it, the more I break it down, the more a part of me thinks, you know what, this sport's not so bad, and I kind of miss it a little bit. Do you find yourself when you do these shows or when you're around wrestling fans do you kind of miss being back in the ring?
I don't necessarily miss being back in the ring, but I do understand. I'm kind of in the same boat as you. Yeah. You know what I mean? You might not want to put a Bears sweater back on and throw a helmet on, but being around and being able to talk about it. Last Tuesday, a couple days ago on WWE Backstage, they just dropped this in my lap. They're like, "Oh, we're going to Ricky Steamboat on. Is it cool if we interview him?" And I got a history with Ricky, so it was cool to be able to talk about that. I think my love for certain aspects of the business, I think you can see it. I think you can see it peek out through the cracks.
Yeah.
So. It definitely with all these things going on, like Mike Tyson putting his gloves back on, watching The Last Dance on ESPN, man, I'm kind of getting itchy.
Well, and we're going to talk about The Last Dance here in a second. But I want to touch on, like, obviously you got guys like Karrion Kross now in Scarlet. You have Kip Sabian and Penelope Ford in AEW. Like, you have these couples that are only couples in the ring, but also out of the ring as well. When you talk about your wife, April, or as wrestling fans know her as AJ Lee, have you ever had conversations of what you guys would do for a dream storyline or a dream gimmick if you ever did get back in the ring again?
No. That's never happened.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like she retired because of her neck. You know what I mean? She's a tiny little thing, and taking a whole bunch of bumps, year round. It messed up her neck. So, if she was to come back, I don't know if she would be able to do the physical stuff anymore.
Gotcha. So, yeah, you actually mentioned Last Dance a little bit, and obviously you're Chicago sports guys. I'm sure the Bulls were super influential with you growing up, and obviously right now in a nation that needs its live sports and it needs its sports coverage, The Last Dance has kind of been a nice appetizer for everybody. I absolutely love the show. I assume you do too as well. But in terms of The Last Dance, what have you taken away from it so far? That's probably the biggest thing.
I love a good documentary, and this one, I don't want it to end, honestly.
Yeah.
But there's a big difference between like a hagiography and a documentary, right? Like documentary, they'll kind of expose kind of like, maybe stuff that guys don't want known. And I really kind of think they're doing that with the Jordan thing. Like they're talking about the gambling. They cover his father's death. Mm-hmm. They're talking about his attitude and his drive to win being so bad it's almost all-consuming. He punches Steve Kerr in the face.
Yeah.
So I like that it's not just, hey, look how great Michael Jordan is, you know what I mean? And, like, to me, obviously, greatest basketball player of all time. And it's mostly because of his mindset and his attitude. You ask him who the greatest basketball player of all time is, he's not going to say himself. Yeah. He always puts the team first. And I think that really – this whole Last Dance documentary really illustrates that, Yep. He comes back after playing baseball, and he's not in the shape he needs to be in. So instead of just talking about it, he gets into shape, comes back the next season, wins another 3. You know what I mean? So he was all about the actions on the court. And that's my biggest takeaway is just, hard work betrays no one.
Yeah, and it's crazy because I didn't really catch the run until his second run, his second three-peat, because I'm 32 years old, so I was like around 10 or 9 years old when that actually took place, and their finals against the Utah Jazz and everything. But in terms of Michael Jordan, I kind of get this sense that, and we saw some emotion from him, and then it was so great to see this guy who's really kind of like a robot actually show some emotion and maybe show a little bit of regret of how he treated some of his teammates. And I find it so ironic that he was the ultimate team guy. He always wanted to win and do what's best for the team, but you don't really hear his teammates talk about hanging out with him now, so maybe you get the sense a little bit of being at the top can be a lonely place sometimes. And then I bring up like a guy like you, he's probably the best in the world. It wasn't just a moniker. I mean, that was actually a fact. I mean, you were the biggest wrestler at one point in the world. Do you kind of find some comparisons with Michael Jordan a little bit, and being that once you get to the top, is it kind of a lonely place to be, or is that just kind of a rare outlier with Michael Jordan?
Well, hey, listen, people will get upset when a pro wrestler compares himself to Michael Jordan. But, watching the documentary, I do. I sit there and I go, man, mindset, I think, is everything. You could be the biggest, tallest, most jacked guy, but if you don't have that mindset, and I think Kobe had it too, right?
Absolutely.
The Mamba mentality. And, there's a difference between being conceited and being convinced. And Michael Jordan was convinced he was the best, but he used that to win championships. I was convinced that I was the best. My downfall almost was that I just wasn't in a team sport.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was doing everything I could to almost act like I was in a team sport. I was trying to get other guys called up to TV. I was trying to, help other guys as much as I can. And, it's not a team sport, so not everybody's got your back. So it is very lonely at the top. Everybody's trying to knock you down a peg. Certain guys don't want to work with you. There's the politics of, who wins and who loses. Egos get involved. whereas Michael Jordan just had to deal with a pure sport. Oh, you think you're better than me? Oh, you think your team's better than the Bulls? Let's prove it. And he proved it.
Talking with CM Punk right now. Speaking of The Last Dance, I mean, I watched this documentary, or, whatever you want to call it, but I watched this this just theatric, just masterpiece. But then I watch it and I go back to being a Milwaukee Bucks fan, right? Because, I mean, I'm from Wisconsin and obviously I'm a big Bucks guy. But you in Chicago, like, do you kind of have a sense of melancholy a little bit where you watch these great teams of the Chicago Bulls and then you look at the landscape of the Bulls right now? I mean, is it a little depressing to kind of think about?
It is and it isn't. I think I'm old enough and I've been on the earth long enough to know that, things go in a circle and there's cycles to everything.
Sure.
I remember watching the Hawks in the playoffs, Stanley Cup final against the Penguins. I might have been in, like, I don't know, 5th grade, 6th grade, something like that, and they got swept. So it's just like, the Hawks weren't always bad. But then I lived through the early 2000s where there'd be like 3,000, 4,000 people in the United Center. They had games blacked out. The management was a mess. And then they turn around and they become like the sports franchise of the 2010s. So, I think everything's a circle, right? It'll happen again with the Bulls. They just have to capture that magic again. You can't be great all the time.
Yeah.
I think especially in modern day sports, it's especially hard with all the money and all the endorsements and everything. And, certain guys just want to make money. Certain guys want to win.
Talking to CM Punk here, and going from a team sport now to more of an individual sport with MMA. And I should probably set the scene real quick of how we first met. It was at a comic book convention in Chicago, and I was looking forward to kind of picking your brain if I could talk to you, because at that time I was on the Chicago Bears and I knew my time was probably coming to an end. And I knew that I had MMA in my back pocket, because let's be honest, I was an outside linebacker wearing a 73 jersey. I mean, if that's not, on the wall saying you're probably not going to be around that long, an outside linebacker rocking the number 73, I mean, come on, the writing's on the wall. So I remember the first question that I asked you when I got introduced to you was, why the transition from professional wrestling to MMA, and how do you feel about it? And I'll never forget, like, you kind of had like this twinkle in your eye a little bit, right? Like, you were excited, you were ecstatic, and you just said, you know what? I may get my ass kicked, or I may win a lot of matches, but I'm going to have fun in the process. I'm going to have fun in the journey. And that's all I needed to hear right there, where I was like, well, you know what? My time in the NFL is coming to an end, and that's okay, because I have MMA in my back pocket. That was like 4 or 5 years ago. So now, as we sit here and talk to you today, CM Punk, I mean, where do you stand on MMA as a career, as growing in mixed martial arts, and how do you feel about it now?
Well, talk about another parallel to Michael Jordan. You have one too. Here's the guy who's the best basketball player in the world, and he up and pieces out, and people think he's ridiculous for wanting to play baseball.
Yeah.
You can choose your own path in life, and I think that's one of the more brilliant things. I think a lot of people get too caught up in what other people will think. To me, I've always been about, what's the worst that can happen, right? I think I might even have said that to you. Like, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to get punched in the face. I'm going to lose a fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, where I'm at right now is I miss my gym because the gym's closed.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
But, I talked to Dana here and there, when he was announcing Fight Island and stuff like that. I was texting with him about it. It's not like, hey, get me on Fight Island. Just like, hey, we're starting for shows.
Yeah.
Nobody knows.
Yeah, of course.
I told him to put it on an aircraft carrier in the middle of the Atlantic or something like that.
Yeah. Well,
right off the coast of Florida, we'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, and you have to wonder, like, how much Mortal Kombat did he play as a kid to kind of come up with Fight Island and bring it to fruition, man? Like, not everybody thinks about that, especially a fight promoter. It's out of the ordinary. It's crazy, man.
It's wild. Yeah. It really is the craziest idea. But he's got the capital for it. He's not hurting. He'll be all right.
Absolutely.
I don't know if I'm ever going to fight again. You know what I mean? But I still train every day. Obviously not with my team right now because it's tough out there right now with all these gyms closed. So like, think about all the fighters that are fighting. We got another fight tomorrow and for UFC, and it's like these guys are training with limited partners. The biggest thing is don't get sick, don't get COVID-19. and then they got to go in a cage and fight. So it's just like a lot of moving parts, a lot of different aspects to fight camp, a lot of different aspects to training partners and where you can train, who you can train with. So it's super interesting time right now.
Well, and you mentioned it, and you actually, I think you've been the voice of, was it CES for MMA? You're actually a commentator on that as well?
CFFC, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, CFFC.
Regional out in the Northeast, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, I mean, obviously, not only do you fight, but you also, you call fights as well. So, obviously, I'm sure you watched the fights in Jacksonville here. We had them this past Saturday and this Wednesday. And I'm from the camp that, man, if I watch a fight like Tony Ferguson and Justin Gaethje, like, that makes you want to get back in the gym, right? Like, yeah, maybe it wasn't Tony Ferguson's best performance, but the guy goes out on a shield, right? It's Tony Ferguson, man. He's an out there kind of character. But then I end up watching this past Wednesday Anthony Smith take on, Glover Teixeira, and it's like I'm watching Anthony Smith spit out teeth like Tic Tacs, and I'm like, oof, I don't feel that motivated right now. Did you kind of get the same feelings a little bit watching those two fights while they're both battles, but one was obviously a lot more brutal than the other one?
Well, yeah, I got beat up in my last fight, right?
Yeah.
And I've never talked about like what went wrong and like my week of fight camp and fight week and stuff like that, because it's just like you make the walk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You agree to do it, and I was looking down the barrel of, am I ever going to get another opportunity to fight in Chicago? Mm-hmm. No, fuck it, let's do it. Who cares? And I was in this situation where Duke's looking at me in the corner, and he's like, "Do you want to stop it?" And I was like, "No, I still think I got a chance to win here." That, it is what it is.
Yep.
But spitting out teeth, I really do think maybe Smith was signaling kind of like, hey, do me a favor here and get me out of here. You know what I mean? And I think Chael Sonnen said it the best, where he was like, you're there to protect your fighter, and you need to get him out of there when he no longer has the chance to win. And it wasn't a title fight. Mm-hmm. 5 rounds, and he just lost 2 rounds, 10-8 rounds, a clear 10-8 rounds. So can he still win? Maybe, but we're getting pretty close to that line where he can't win. And he looked like he was in bad shape. The corners are going to get criticized. Anthony Smith's already said what he said.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting conversation to have, and I think Duke Rufus, my head trainer, is one of the best cornermen in the business. He's told Anthony Pettis, like, look, I can't send you back out there if you just broke your hand. You don't have one of your weapons. You're not going to be able to defend yourself, and you're not going to be able to fight the way you need to fight to win this fight. So, that's a heavy responsibility, and I think a lot more fighters need to have that conversation with their corner prior to fights.
Without a doubt. I think sometimes it's the corner's job to save the fighter from themselves, because they call Anthony Smith Lionheart for a reason, right? The guy wasn't going to tap. He wasn't going to quit. He was going to see it to the end. And sometimes it is the corner's job to save the fighter from themselves. So a few more questions here. Obviously, we got to touch on the NHL a little bit. Not much to talk about right now with the landscape of COVID-19 and everything. But actually, the last time we had you on the show, there was a little bet that took place. You had the Bruins in 6, and I had the St. Louis Blues in 6. It goes 7 games, but at the end of the day, I was right, you were wrong. It is what it is. Now, I get it. You're a Chicago guy. You hate St. Louis. And to be fair, I can't stand the Cardinals. So I'm with you on that one. One of the best compliments that I ever received from a Cubs fan at Wrigley Field after the Brewers got blown out by him is a Cubs fan who was probably 10 beers deep, comes up to me. He's like, hey, man, you know what? It was a rough loss for the Brewers, but at the end of the day, we both hate the Cardinals. And I said, you know what? I respect you, sir, and I like the way you do business. So we went on our merry way, but I actually found a little respect for Cubs fans. But when we're talking about, the St. Louis Blues winning that Stanley Cup, I never really got your reaction from it, right? Because I understand you don't like the city of St. Louis, and that's kind of ingrained in you being from Chicago. But as far as the way they won it, the way they had that roster built up and everything, I mean, do you think that it was good for hockey to have the St. Louis Blues win?
Oh man, that's a rough. You really worded that in a rough way for me to answer it.
That was the goal.
I think it's an amazing accomplishment. Them being dead last, players. Right after the new year, them being dead last, players fighting in practice, like fist fighting. And yeah, it shows you the determination and the grit and a hell of a team they put together. I will, however, say that Berube, the coach, he spent a lot of time here coaching in Chicago, the Chicago Wolves. So I'm assuming that that's probably where that team got their edge from here in Windy City, Chicago.
Yep.
So, in a roundabout way, Chicago kind of helped them win. You know what I mean? Berube getting that attitude from Chicago. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Wow, like the ultimate John, like the John Stockton pivot of all pivots right there. But I'm not mad at it, man. I see you. Can you agree with me on this? In terms of the song Gloria, is it one of the best things to happen to hockey since stick taps and shaking hands after a playoff game?
I mean, I root for a team where everybody hates their goal song. Everybody hates Chelsea Dagger. You know what I mean? So it's just, I can't like the song. You know what I mean? Like, I can't just be like, what a great song. It's just, it's still, I don't want to talk about it anymore. I'd rather talk about golf. I cannot believe the Blues won the Stanley Cup. This sucks.
Well, I'm going to say this, though, okay? In terms of the Gloria song, I've never airboarded a keyboard song in my entire life until Gloria came out. Like, I've had a situation where I was riding with my stepdad one time, and all of a sudden Bob Seger turned the page, came on, and like he turned up the radio up to 11 and said, "Austin, can you please be quiet?" I think Gloria is to like moms to what like Bob Seger turned the page is to dads out there. So I'm not mad at the song Gloria. CM Punk, man, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Obviously an open door policy. Whenever you want to come back on, you're more than welcome. Can we expect anything else of you, man? Honestly, you had your movie Girl on the Third Floor. It got rave reviews. You've done comic books, MMA fighting, professional wrestling. Like, what's next on the docket right now for CM Punk?
Well, I wish I could give you concrete answers, but because of coronavirus, literally everything's on hold. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I got a couple of roles in some films coming up that I was excited to get to shoot, but everything's on hold. Production stopped across the board on everything. So you can catch me on, like once a month, I'm on, Fox Sports 1 doing WWE Backstage, talking about a little pro wrestling. And I'm crossing my fingers that CFFC will come back hopefully in like August. We get to do some shows with the help of UFC. But as far as sports goes, I don't think we're going to have fans in seats until early next year. I think that's just the reality across the board. NFL, NHL, MMA, everything.
Yeah.
What's important right now is just everybody tries to go out there, wear a mask if you're grocery shopping, stay healthy, and don't get anybody else sick.
Well said, man. CM Punk, thanks for stopping by.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome, man.